Serious. Folks who live in the deep wilderness or very rural areas, what is the scariest, most unsettling thing you've experienced out there? New house. Very rural. Bears. Moose. Husband was traveling internationally and I was at home in the winter with an 8-month-old baby. Woke up 1 AM to let the dog out, and the dog got interested in some tracks. Big boot tracks that led from the forest, to my shed, to the side window and then to the back window of the house. The dog had not barked, and our alarm wasn't tripped, but somebody had walked out from the woods and stared in my windows. Came home one day and noticed large, size 13 or so, boot tracks circling my house and at each window. Considering I live in a rural home with my 3 and 6-year-old wife and golden retriever, I was a little worked up. Spent half of that day looking at security systems and trying to track where the peeping Tom came from. There are no houses for at least a mile. Wife comes home and tells me that she used my boots to feed the birds and occasionally check on the kids through the windows. Found a shack in the woods about 4 miles behind my place. Approaching it, I saw there was some random things spray painted on it. Roses, pentagrams, and swastikas. I walk up to it and there was someone inside. Not moving, not speaking, he was just staring at the blank wall on the inside of this shack. This was on my family's property. Obviously I didn't stay long, but I noticed on my sprint out there were deep but small holes dug around the area. Still scares me to go around the place. The shack has been burned since I last checked and I didn't know who it was. Sounds like he was using your shack as a drug den. He probably thought it was abandoned, judging by how deep into the woods you said it was. The holes everywhere could have been from him trying to dig up crack or heroin or whatever that he buried at some point. Definitely wouldn't be the first time that someone did that. Went for a late night walk up the hill behind my place so I could watch the stars. I foolishly turned down company because I really wanted some peace with my thoughts and to soak in the beauty on my own. There was basically nothing for miles in all directions and zero light pollution, so it was truly stunning and dark. I was out there for about 40 minutes when I eventually got a nervous feeling that raised all the hair on my arms and sent a surging chill up my back. I hauled ass back to the house like a kid runs up the basement stairs from an imaginary monster and slammed the door behind me. The next morning I found out a drifter down the road, maybe 3/4 of a mile away, was attacked by a mountain lion the same night. I've heard several people mention that feeling in different ways, but all I know is, when you feel it, move. I'm so glad you're alright. Sorry that drifter was attacked. He survived. But still terrifying. From what I've heard from people who've had encounters, you really don't realize you're being stalked by one, and that's the most unsettling part. There was this one time me and my brother were hiking out in the woods behind our house and we both got this super weird feeling. We both started to feel uneasy and I noticed that our cat had followed us out into the woods and started meowing. We both approached her, but before we could pet her she jumped off and went to another location and would sit and wait. She was very tense and was acting abnormally. Every time we'd near her she'd just move further away. Eventually we realized that she was leading us out of the woods. When we came back into the clearing where our house was, she started acting normal again and playful and would beg for pats and attention. To this day, my brother and I have no idea what was going on back there. This was about a decade ago and we used to go into the woods every day to play, so we were very familiar with everything back there and we'd never gotten that weird feeling before or ever since. That was probably a mountain lion giving you the weird feeling. They use infrasound when they hunt. It's sound lower than human hearing range, and by God does that give you the worst fear feeling in the world. My childhood home was in a desolate place surrounded by forests. I have my fair share of strange stories, but this scared me the most. I was home alone at night, as my mom and stepdad had went to the store. This wasn't that strange. I was 15, so perfectly capable of staying alone for an hour or two. Then something started pounding on the front door. I thought it was my stepdad, that maybe they had forgotten their key or something. I got up to let them in, but then I saw my 2 little dogs. They normally ran up to the door and barked at anyone out there. Instead, they were looking up at me from the couch with something I can't explain in their eyes. I had a bad feeling about everything. so I hid in my bedroom and called my mom. Of course, she didn't answer. The knocking on the door quickly stopped and moved to my bedroom window. I had a tapestry hanging in front of it, so I couldn't see outside at whatever was knocking. I started to really panic, but after another minute or two my mom answered the phone. The knocking totally stopped then, and the bad feeling I had disappeared. The thing is, we had outside dogs. If a person or large animal had come up into my yard, they would have gone crazy barking at them. There was also a bunch of mud in front of my window, but there were no footprints in it. I'm normally a very skeptical person, but I still can't explain this years later. It has changed my mind about ever living in a rural area. Edit. A lot of the replies are suggesting things like wasps or moths. This happened in the middle of winter, so there weren't any bugs around. I didn't live in an area with any bugs big enough to make that loud of a sound. I also forgot to say in the original post, but one of the scariest things about it was how human the knocking sounded. More specifically, whatever it was knocked the exact way that my stepfather did, as in, he would go from the door to my bedroom window to get my attention. Oh god, this isn't a rural story but here it is. A few months back I was taking a shower when I heard my husband tap on the bathroom door. I thought he had gotten off work early. I had just left the bar he worked at after he told me he had another hour or two before he was cut. So I opened the door and called for him and neither him or the dog responded. In my mind someone has broken in and murdered our dog and is trying to lure me out of the bathroom. I'm really into unsolved murders and disappearances. We don't live in a dangerous area, but it's definitely a low-income area with a fair amount of crime. I immediately closed and locked the bathroom door and called him. He was still at work. He very calmly told me to lock the door and stay in the bathroom and he'd be home in a few minutes. He also asked me to call the police, to which I responded A. I'm naked with no clothing or towel. B. I was pretty sure the door was locked and was not going to run the length of our apartment to open the door if I was in there with a stranger. So I sit down on the edge of the bathtub with a pair of sewing scissors, my only available weapon, and wait until I hear him ripping through every closet and room in our apartment. Turns out I was completely alone and our dog was asleep on the bed. The thing that still screws me up, the knock on the door sounded exactly like his unique, almost rhythmic tap he does when I'm in the bathroom. We've had a couple other weird occurrences in our apartment that has made me feel we are not alone. Our pet sitter said she also feels very uncomfortable in our apartment. I don't feel like I'm alone. Just posted this in another thread but I just saw this one and I thought I'd share it here too. Not sure if it fits completely but anyway, 4 years ago me and my best friend decided to go to her tiny house in the woods that her grandpa owned and stay for a few days. The place was completely isolated. The road was really far away and there were barely any houses around. When we used to take walks during daytime, the first house that we saw was 30 minutes away from the one we were currently staying in. Her grandpa's house was a one-story only. There was one tiny bathroom, the kitchen was in the living room area and one bedroom. One night, I asked her to keep me company while I smoke a cigarette outside on the gazebo. She agreed and before we went outside, we locked the front door even though the gazebo was right next to the house and we could easily see if someone tried to get inside. We stayed a little longer outside because we got carried away in our conversation when all of a sudden we hear something hit the roof of the gazebo loudly. It was so freaking loud, it sounded like a body fell off the sky and onto the roof. We hecking froze. None of us would even dare breathe. We just looked at each other. I know that my best friend in these type of situations goes into full panic mode, screaming, running. So before she even managed to scream I told her quietly to not make a sound and just grab her phone and go inside the house. We get up, walk away from the gazebo and to the front door and I look up to see if there is something up there. Nothing. We get to the front door and guess what? It's flipping open, almost frigging halfway open. At this point, my best friend starts jumping around and making sounds and tries to dial her grandpa. What the hell is that poor man even gonna do? It's a 2-hour drive from where he is. He didn't pick up at first so I finally managed to convince my best friend to go inside and look around to see if someone's in the house. As I previously mentioned, the place is really small so we managed to search the whole place in like a minute. There was nobody in the house. There's only one window in the house, which is in the bedroom, and it's high up and it was closed. Her grandpa finally called back. We told him what happened and he said that we probably didn't lock the front door properly, but he didn't mention anything about the loud damning thump on the roof of the gazebo. To this day, I still have no bleeping clue what that was. We didn't sleep the whole night and all of the lights in the house were on because we didn't dare to spend a second in the dark after what happened. Edit. I read some of your comments and I wanted to answer some of them and clarify things. No mountain lions here. Maybe some wolves and foxes, but it's extremely rare, and I also have never seen either of them outside with my own 2 eyes. As for tree branches, there wasn't anything on top of the roof, which is a straight horizontal roof. I mentioned this in one of my replies. It's not that high, so it can be easily checked, and no sound of anything hitting the ground afterwards. Also, for the people mentioning snow, it was the beginning of September. As for the people saying that it might have been a person trying to scare us, this is the thing that terrifies me the most, because around us was nothing but dark woods, and as I've mentioned previously, the place is really isolated. I would like a logical explanation for all of this, but the more I think about it and read your comments, the more terrified I am.